Hey, what's going on? Got another video for you all. And today's topic is no one is good. No, not one. No one is righteous. No, not one. Now, I know this video will be counterintuitive to a lot of people because we all like to think so highly of ourselves, but the evidence of our lives tend to prove otherwise. Now, let's examine this. No one is good but God. Now, let's define good. Good is that which is morally right or righteous. And we have to understand that good cannot be defined by our individual selfish desires, but based on a universal law, based on a higher standard of righteousness that all can communicate and agree on to provide a benefit or advantage to someone or something unbiasedly. Unbiasedly meaning that not taking advantage of another to reap a benefit, and not thinking of ourselves over another to reap a benefit. See, all will not benefit in corruption or evil, but many would rather be exploited, disenfranchised, deceived, or destroyed by corruption. And none of us want to be counted in the casualties of the subjective good of another. We often blame others for the evil they have done to us while not being accountable for the evil within us that led us to even engage with that person in the first place. Let me use an example. Lust is a sin. Albeit a natural sin, it's a sin because our hearts and minds are set on lust more than God. We have to understand that our impulses, our instincts, unsubmitted to a higher moral standard, will produce nothing but evil. We all know the consequences of being led by lust alone, ignoring whether a person shows good values, has structure in their life, or behavior that reflects a universal moral law within us all. We all know this. It's a delusion that we are good unto ourselves, and we must see God outside of ourselves to keep ourselves honest and held accountable so that we can discern righteous deeds from unrighteous deeds. Otherwise, we are self-deluded and we will be blind to our own destruction by playing right into the evil, that uses our own evil hearts and minds that are set on the flesh. We cannot be good on our own because we have a choice to be evil. Just a choice. If you remember Adam and Eve, before they had eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they had no knowledge of evil. All they knew was to obey God and obey his will and his word. That's all they knew. And see, now that we not only have a choice to be evil, but our natural lens on how we see things are not aligned with the perfect standard at the beginning. Even at our birth, we are born into sin. Our minds are set on ourselves and not on God. We're unsubmitted to truth outside of ourselves. So we now, like in today's world, we redefine words. We redefine marriage. We redefine love. We redefined everything based on selfish feelings and no longer on God, which is something that is self-evident in all of the minds of our hearts and our conscience. Well, the mind in our mind and our hearts. Our natural innate state is hostile and it's in natural rebellion to God's law. Let's give an example. We don't have to teach children to lie or to be sneaky when they're wrong. Hiding behavior is our conscience exposing our wrong. It's self-evident. Our corrupt nature individually is unsubmitted to truth and righteousness, and is not based on God's perfect law, will, and design. People in the natural state are subject to wicked temptations and desires of our own flesh to benefit out of a corrupt world. How many times do we see people doing anything to acquire money in the world that makes you compromise your values to get the money? We complain about the people at the upper 1%, But those people had to break the most rules, had to compromise the most values to acquire the money. See, good is pure, it's perfect, it's no darkness, no corruption, and no deception, and is not subject to vanity or lust, but is perfectly in line with God's holy law. Our natural fleshly minds and hearts are set on wickedness, proved by the very reason we have laws to restrict and restrain the appetites of our flesh. How many times have we failed our own personal moral expectations of how we should live? But yet we have unreasonable expectations and trust in others, proven to be just as fallible as ourselves. Good in God's biblical word is always confirmed by our conscience balancing the treatment of others with ourselves, by setting the treatment on of others and how we would like to be viewed and treated. An example is why lying, murder, and theft are wrong. They're proved because we wouldn't want that to be done to us. And that's also why good has to be proven beyond ourselves, because otherwise people will justify why they did any evil to have a quote good unquote benefit to themselves. See, individually and personally, they can be tactics to acquire things, albeit evil ones, to provide a selfish benefit of satisfaction for an individual. But you must break the universal moral law established by your own hearts and minds and conscience to do it. See, Jesus Christ did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law by eliminating the subjective and relative view of breaking the law in the view of corrupt law-breaking people. Let me explain that again. Jesus Christ of the Bible, he eliminated the subjective and relative view of breaking the law, determined by corrupt law-breaking people. How many times do we see in politics the corrupt people are circumventing the law for themselves to do their own corruption? And Jesus began it with the intent of the heart. That's evident in the woman who was caught in adultery. Jesus said, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." Well, they were condemning that woman to death. Calling out her sin was not wrong, but condemning her to death because of her sin, when everyone else is just as sinful, that needs an explanation, because those people were just as dirty and defiled as she was. Of old, people would uphold the appearances of keeping the law while being just as wicked as the heathen, based on how visible their sin is, in the public view, or how well it can be cloaked in legal jargon and by subjective, corrupt views of wicked men. But Christ exposed this by saying that murder starts with the anger without cause in the heart, and adultery to begin with the lusting outside of the biblical structure and design. This exposes the wicked nature in all at the inception of all evil. See, Jesus wanted to show people that the evil started well beyond the action, and God was judging the intent of that heart. And we all had that same level. That's why all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And that's why the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? See, we all are led by a corrupt heart. We must be born again. We must be recreated back to the image of God that is set according to his commandments and his law. Sin does start with the thought and the intent of the heart, and not just for a few whose sin has fully matured into an egregious action or behavior. See, we look at the egregious action or the behavior as saying, "Oh, you're wrong," but internally we all know that we struggle with the same sin, whether we committed that action or not. We all have it within us, proving that we're not good. This is easily proven in lust. We lust. You could be married and you still lust after another person's wife or husband, causing folks. And this really causes us to see the impossibility of being perfect in our natural self, in our natural selfish state, and we become willingly and joyfully to see the benefit of being conformed to God's law, beginning with the change of how we see ourselves. before a holy, eternal God. See, sin starts in the flesh, and it must be destroyed in the flesh by one who overcame the flesh by walking in perfect righteousness in order to be the perfect sacrifice. And that explains Christ. I'm not getting too deep in that, but I'm just going to say that. Once our spirit is restored back to God, we will be led by the Spirit and not by the flesh, and we can now discern how to use things in this world more constructively in wisdom, while avoiding the destruction that comes with being led by the flesh. All right, y'all. Peace out.